I'm Alicia.
And I'm Maddie.
And welcome to the Fangirl Diaries, a podcast where we talk about our obsessions,
Reminisce about our teen icons,
and explore the books, movies, and shows that made us the incredibly nerdy 30-somethings that we now are.
Hey Alicia!
We're back!
It's season 2!
Yeah, this is season 2!
Season 2 of the Fangirl Diaries is here!
I'm so excited about it, and it's like, it's our own thing. It's not even something that I'm like externally a fan of. It's only us doing it.
But it's great!
I've been so excited for weeks.
Oh.
I missed our chats.
It's really fun, and we've got like some incredible stuff to talk about this season. I don't know whether you want to give any hints at some of the things you're excited about.
We have too much stuff, is our problem.
Yeah.
Every time I message you with a different lineup for season 2, the things that have hit the cutting room floor, I'm like, no, we can't cut that. Like, it's now got to a point of planning, like, well, this would have to go in season 5.
I know, we haven't done Game of Thrones, we haven't done Buffy, Vampire Diaries, we haven't done Harry Potter.
I know. These are enormous.
So why don't you get on the Instagram, you guys, listeners, and tell us what you would like us to talk about. But in the meantime, we're going to start this season off really strong with Dune.
And we're doing part 1 and part 2. Or, as I realised some people were calling it, Tune.
Dune?
No.
Oh, Tune.
Tune. Have you heard this?
No.
I hadn't until today. That there's Dune Part 1, and then there's Dune Part 2, which some people are calling Tune. Yeah, I was like, what are they talking about? And then I was like, okay, I can get my head around this.
And also it makes a load of sense because essentially the films Parts 1 and 2 cover the scope of the first whole book of Dune. So it makes sense to talk about all together.
Is this, actually, as you said that, is this one of the very few occasions on which you and I are signing off on and approving the subdivision of one book into multiple films, which normally we rage against?
Yeah, to be fair, we have in the past raged against that,
so much
even
rage.
on the podcast.
Yeah.
And no, I'm like all for it this time. I think it worked really well.
Me too, which is an exception. We have absolutely raged against like The Hobbit. What a waste of 3 movies.
Yeah, the last Harry Potter film.
Oh, the last Harry Potter film. Dare we mention Breaking Dawn Part 1 and 2?
No, don't even think about it.
Too much. There are too many terrible examples of this, but you're totally right. This is one book where the films are given the breathing space to attempt to get, as much detail out of this
and
as
to
possible.
tell a big story, right? Like, the story in the book is big, and it definitely merited splitting it out. No problems there.
The scope of the Dune universe and the merit of giving it 2 films is like, this is not comparable to the scope of needing Mockingjay Part 1 and 2.
No.
It's almost an embarrassment. This, you could have split this book almost into 3 movies if you wanted. So there was, even the 2 gave a little bit of a sense of restraint on the part of the filmmakers, going, right, okay, this is a manageable amount, but this works in terms of pace, and they don't feel flabby.
Yeah, and this is like one of the biggest works of sci-fi writing in like sci-fi history.
Mm-hmm.
It's a classic. It's considered one of the greatest novels in sci-fi of all time. And take your time over it. Why not?
I always think if there was like, God, I'd love to design this as well, like an A-level or an AP in sort of sci-fi, or another one in fantasy.
Yeah.
When you think about what your core texts would be, like, this is a core text.
This is a core text.
This is a core text. The level of detail and world building in this book is like, if you were going to study how to do an epic sci-fi, book and then book to screen adaptation, like, this would be on the syllabus.
Yes.
So we're dealing with something big today.
And influential. Like, a lot of people will look at it and be like, oh, that reminds me of, like, the desert planets on Star Wars. Well, I wonder why that is.
It completely blew my mind recently because you forget chronologically what precedes what.
Yeah.
And I'm lame, so I was watching a YouTube video about Star Wars, because that's what I do on my Sundays. And they were explaining that the concept of the Jedi, and the whole, like, these aren't the droids you're looking for, something, is influenced by the voice and that whole concept of the Bene Gesserit and their powers in Dune.
Of course.
That to me is such a treat. That's the sort of thing that I want to like rush out and tell somebody about. Like today on YouTube I found, and then unless you're there, I look around me like, no one cares.
Oh, I watched
you.
I watched like a whole hour and a half, maybe 2 hour long YouTube video that was like dissecting Dune Part 1 before I went back to watch Dune Part 2. I was just like, I need to consume the content.
This is why we are friends. This is the reason. And we are doing these both together. So we could have, I think we even thought about, do we do Dune Part 1 in the last season? And then, then do Dune Part 2. But Dune Part 2 came out on our season break.
Yeah.
And we were like, while these are fresh in our mind, I feel like this was one of the most recent films I've seen.
Yes, it's the last film I saw in the cinema.
I wish I could say the same, but I've just come back from America and they like movies.
Oh, yeah.
So we saw some stuff, but this is pretty recent. And before Dune Part 2 came out, very luckily, the little cinema near me did like a re-release of Dune Part 1 and put it on the screen.
Oh, we rewatched it at home, which was, it was good fun.
But that would have been so different from, do you remember how, because we saw Dune Part 1 together.
Yeah, like several years ago, right? You reminded me quite how long ago it was that Dune Part 1 came out.
It was 2021.
That's crazy, isn't it?
And I don't know why time feels compressed for me now, because Dune Part 1 was 2021, Dune Part 2 was 2024. Which means the gap between these, we were saying, is sort of like a Fellowship to the Lord of the Rings Return of the King gap.
Like, beginning to end.
Yeah, but remember, we used to feel like the wait for every December was an age. Whereas I feel like Dune Part 1 came out the other day.
I don't know, I kind of feel that, but I also remember in the in-betweening years being like, when is the next one coming? I need to see more.
Yeah.
So what do you think, when we first decided that we were going to go and see Dune Part 1 together in the IMAX, what was it that made us think we gotta go see this in like massive screen, like this is an event?
Or just like, this is for us.
Yeah.
This is in our wheelhouse.
What was it that like made us buy those tickets?
That's a good question. I think, oh no, maybe I have a really shameful reason. I think the trailer came out. This was before I even really knew what was what. And it had Timothée Chalamet in it. And whenever he's in a trailer, I'm like, what is this? And then within 5 seconds, it looked like a sort of space epic battle thing. There was people in awesome costumes. Somebody said something about House Atreides, House Harkonnen, and I was like, let me stop you there. I'm going to see this movie.
Yeah. This is my kind of thing.
This is my kind of thing. I liaised with you, and you were like, well, yeah, obviously, this is Dune.
Yes.
Because your knowledge of this, like, you'd read this already.
Yeah, so this is another one of those things which I think will come up a lot it definitely would have come up with Lord of the Rings and maybe some other things, where I was introduced to this world by my dad. And it was one of these like books that was like on the shelf of dad's like, these are the greatest sci-fis and fantasy books ever, next to Lord of the Rings and Isaac Asimov and and Contact and all these like big sci-fi and fantasy works of literature. And Dad at some point when I was probably about like 12 like came up to me and was like, this is the greatest book of all time, you must read it. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I did read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, but often when I was given things by my dad, like, at that age, I didn't really quite know what to do with them, and they would take me a lot longer to read than, like, I don't know what else I would have been reading Harry Potter and, like, other more, like, kind of accessible stuff. And so I couldn't, like, it was like I could tell these things were great. And I was like reading them, like appreciating the work and the kind of the world. But because they were slower and bigger and more like difficult, at that age, I couldn't quite really get into what it was that like made my dad say this was the greatest thing ever. Mm-hmm.
It is a bit hard for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, until I kind of came back to it later and was like, no, I actually do appreciate this.
I love that your dad had that shelf and that his eagerness was just like, all right, it was like it had to burst out of him,
Yeah.
You've got to have this now.
Yeah.
Even though I reckon Dune is maybe right for... And there'll be people listening to this like, I read it at 10. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. But maybe at like 15 or up or
Yeah,
something.
15, 16 or something. Yeah.
Not because there's like any sort of like prohibited content, but because it's complicated. It's hard.
Yeah.
I read this just before the film came out because I think you suggested it, and it's also a complex world and I like to know my material.
Yeah.
So I read it but thought, whoa, I gotta pay attention. I was like circling things in, at the back, it explains the different terminology.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of pages in, I thought, right, this is serious stuff.
I better start taking notes.
I'm going to start taking some notes of this, exactly. But the fact that your dad gave you that shelf and was so eager to give them to you age 12, oh, Madeline, I fear for, can you imagine, like that was one shelf. Think of the shelves we have.
Oh, no.
And that like, we're going to have to give our children, like, we're going to be like, no, don't give them this till they're about 18.
Yeah, maybe we need to, like, in advance, put, like, age labels next to them. Like, when is it appropriate to show them these things?
Yes. Otherwise, we're going to
Don't freak them out.
We'll be like, here you go, 7-year-old. Here's Game of Thrones Part 1. They'll be like, what? You're right, we'll have to put labels on. Like, don't give them this until later.
Also, there's something about, like, things that your parents... like want to pass on to you.
Yeah.
Like I can imagine that feeling because I love sharing things with people. I can imagine if you have a kid, you just want to share with them the things that you love. But like also kids like to not like the things that parents like.
I think we're going to really struggle with this.
Cope.
I don't know how we'll cope either. We'll have to just like keep. This is why we have to keep doing this podcast because it's fine. We'll just keep doing our thing. And can you imagine someone? They'll be like, oh, I don't want to read Harry Potter. We'll be like...
greatest work of our generation!
What? You mean this masterpiece? What's wrong with you? On a complete segue, and then we will come back to Dune.
Yeah.
I fear that Harry Potter is not cool anymore.
I know, it isn't.
Like, for kids.
Well, no, I think kids still read it. Kids still read it, but I actually think it's becoming more of a acceptance that it's kids' books, whereas when we were growing up, it became like an adult teenage phenomenon. I think people are realizing, like, the reading age of Harry Potter is very young. Like, even the later books, you can read as a child. And I think, like, maybe if we just put them in the category of children's books in our minds, that's okay.
But I worry that... so now, if I'm talking to, like, an 18 or 19-year-old, like, I will so easily make a reference that I just assume they are au fait with.
Yeah.
To, like, I don't know, the Weasley twins. And I get blank looks half the time, and I think... What happened in your childhood? Like, how do you not know who the Weasley twins are?
Them. I think it's just not quite the same anymore.
Okay, fine. But then very recently
it would be like Famous Five or like, other things that are like, most people read them, but not everyone. And
or Roald Dahl or something.
Roald Dahl,
You just hope that these are universal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was like a little the little primary school near me did a sort of, that day where you dress up as book characters.
Yeah,
was it World Book Day?
Yeah.
And I was like, going to get a coffee or something, and I saw a reassuring number of 8-year-olds dressed as Harry Potter characters.
Yeah,
so I thought, fine, it's fine, it's surviving.
Anyway, back to Dune.
Back to Dune. So we went to see Dune 1 together.
Yeah.
Me having recently tried the book, I didn't finish it because the film was released, our tickets were too soon. Yeah. And I think you also said, oh, don't worry, because the second half of this book is the next film anyway.
Yes, they were only adapting the first half of the book, so...
Yeah. But it meant that I did have a pretty decent... I knew what I was watching, basically, whereas I know a few people who had zero knowledge of this found it pretty confusing.
Do you think?
Yeah. Not the people we went with to the cinema,
good.
but
I
other
was
people.
Gonna say, like, Ben got it. Yeah, and he really loved it. He really liked it.
Or maybe we don't notice just the amount of, like, passive knowledge they gain from just we talk about these things around them.
Maybe.
So people who've gone to the cinema with us will have been chatting about, this thing about Paul Atreides and maybe it just, like, they absorb it.
Yeah, and to be fair, that 2-hour explanation of part 1 that I mentioned that I rewatched before part 2, Ben also watched that on my recommendation. He was like, this is incredible. I needed this. This explained everything.
Yes.
I was like, yeah, okay, maybe you do need a little bit of background.
It's true, and as I rewatched part 1 again, I thought, oh, I missed that the first time, or I just, you're so busy absorbing the whole thing.
Yeah, and I
easy
think
to miss bits.
that was what was great about Part 1 is that it created an atmosphere of this huge world that actually it didn't expect you to go into every single detail of like understanding how it all worked behind the scenes, but it did create the impression and give you the sense of a real functioning kind of future world in like the visuals of the different planets and the different houses and these different like kind of cultures, and you really got a sense of the depth of the world without them needing to lay it all out in a map or an explanation or a like, you know, it created an immersion into a world where you didn't feel pressure to like completely understand everything, but you knew that the depth was there.
And you got enough that you could follow.
Yes.
Massive props to, we can't give enough credit to like the visual design of this film, but whoever was designing kind of costume, makeup, and basically the look of each of the houses, some of which is fairly true, we were saying, to the book, and others of which they've taken a slightly different direction for the film, does a brilliant job, because you really do absorb, okay, that's the Harkonnens. Okay, they all look like that. All right, now we're on Gady Prime, or now we're here. And it does use classic aids like there are the little subtitles that come up, like Home World of the Atreides, Caladan. And you get the very helpful voiceover from Zendaya at the start that sort of sets the whole thing up. But otherwise, we were sort of saying before this, it does a really good job of show, not tell. And of letting you get the visual cues rather than like a really, really complex verbal communication of plot that can be so dry.
Yeah, it's you learn things about the worlds and the cultures as they happen organically rather than like it being thrown at you or forced down your throat.
Yeah, which I don't think we've seen a good enough, as good a version of that since, I would say, season 1 of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's a good comparison.
Yeah, which allowed people who hadn't read the book to totally see from the beginning, right, that's the Lannisters.
Yeah.
Okay, they're different from, who does Daenerys end up with in the desert?
The like Khal Drogo and
his group. Yeah. Those guys. You can see we've not done our prep for our Game of Thrones stuff yet. But like immediately there's that separation of the different worlds and different races and the different houses and things. And that works just as well in this.
Yeah.
Done through costuming and makeup and visual in the same way that you think, okay, cool. This is not going to be too hard to follow.
Definitely. And because it's been split into, the story in the first is not
the
too
Dothraki.
complicated.
That was
the
Dothraki. Thank you.
The story in the first half, in this first film, is not overly complicated.
No.
Which works really well because it just gives you time to absorb the fact the world is very complicated and the back kind of drop of it all is very complex. But the actual plot of what happens in the first movie is quite... There's not loads and loads that happens, and so there's lots of time to kind of, to just be immersed in the experience of the world rather than trying to follow a really complex plot.
Yeah, that's right. Like, if we think about, really, your main through narrative of Dune Part 1 is the Atreides family arriving on Arrakis.
Yeah.
Us understanding that they are now in charge of spice production.
Yeah.
And that this has really pissed off the Harkonnens, who've been kicked off world, back to their home. And that this is going to create a war between them, which then comes to a head in the big battle that happens, and Paul and Jessica have to flee.
Yeah.
The complex stuff simmering at the side of that is 2 sub-narratives. The one about the Emperor having been the sort of puppet master of this.
Yes, and why is he manipulating this situation? What's he trying to achieve?
Yeah, and they briefly introduced that House Atreides was starting to wield too much power, so he's sort of engineered a conflict between these 2 houses, hoping to wipe out House Atreides.
Yeah.
But that is something that, unless you were really listening, maybe some people kind of missed a little bit, or
becomes more relevant
obvious
in the second one, but is less relevant in the first one.
Exactly. The subplots get mentioned. I say subplots, that's not really right, but these sort of adjacent plots are simmering
Machinations.
in part 1.
That was my word for it.
Yes.
There's lots of
that.
machinations going on, different people with different motives that all kind of conspire, but the actual plot through the middle is quite straight.
Exactly. Even if you didn't get any of your subplots, you're going to enjoy this movie.
Yeah.
And the other one being my absolute favourite thing about Dune, which is the concept of, they play with, or Frank Herbert plays with, this notion of the chosen one.
Yeah.
Which is so clever, because a chosen one plot, a lot of, is mine and your bread and butter.
Yeah.
This is like essential to fantasy, to sci-fi, to... There's going to be very few things that we talk about on this podcast that doesn't have a chosen
some
one.
kind of chosen one main character.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so often that's done with complete seriousness.
Yeah.
And that there is a chosen one, and of course, there's a prophecy.
Yeah.
This book and this whole franchise explores, but what if that is the product of PR? And what if there isn't a chosen one? Or if there even is it this guy? Can you self-elect as the chosen one? How dangerous is it to spread a chosen one narrative? And I thought, I've not really seen this before. This is really clever.
Yeah, and
I really liked that.
It fits into like this, kind of wider political point around like charismatic leaders and how they manage to kind of manipulate populations and use culture and superstition to their advantage. And I think it's, trying to make a point about real political leaders. As much as it's about the chosen one as a narrative point, I think it's also about, leadership and how we follow charisma and power in that way, and what stories need to be told in order to have that kind of a leader in our world.
100%.
Yeah.
The sort of the theme or the bit of plotting that I find less interesting, but that might just be because it's profiled as the main thing about Dune, is the concept of the fact that spice being harvested is comparable to oil being mined in our contemporary culture in the Gulf. And it's normally the thing that most reviews or commentators on this franchise lead with. And I think, that's not the most interesting thing here.
I would say that's a very surface level interpretation of what the book's about. It's not spice is like, you're always going to have a resource that is like the valuable resource. Like that's how worlds work. And so it makes sense that there is one. And spice is interesting in that it's a reflection of another kind of interesting theme in the world, that the spice gives them lots of abilities and powers that we don't quite understand, and those play in contrast to the fact that there's almost no technological advanced power in this world, because they kind of explain it in not that much detail in the films.
The films don't go into it at all.
But basically the reason you see a lot of the kind of technology is very mechanical, quite basic. They're sometimes even fighting with like swords and knives and things. And a lot of that is because this is set in a future, very, very far in our future, like 20,000 years or so, where there has been in the past a huge, huge technological uprising of computing and artificial intelligence and robotics, and the machines have advanced to incredible levels. But then there was, a kind of overthrowing of those and essentially a banning of any kind of computing machine of any kind. And so we're in this extremely, extremely futuristic world with all of these kind of technologies that are futuristic, but also they mostly come from the organic world and from the spice and from people's minds having evolved, and not from here's this really cool computer that can do cool things for you. That's been kind of eliminated from the world. And I think that's what's interesting about the spice narrative, is it's kind of like an alternative to what could we do to evolve as human beings in the natural world if we didn't have computing. It's enhancing real biology and real human mind and ability.
I'm surprised the film didn't do a bit more explanation on that, because it is a key concept from the book. And okay, maybe they'd be a little bit lengthy to include in the film, but there would have been a way to explain it, because the emphasis then becomes on powers and skills that a human being can develop.
Yes.
Whether that is certain types of personal mind or fear control that you see characters like Jessica and Paul learn how to do, whether it's immense physical skills, because a lot of fighting has to be hand to hand. The range of things, it's really pushing the human ability to the extreme, which is awesome, because it's a different way of looking at, again, a relatively popular fantasy or sci-fi concept, which is just, well, they just have powers.
No, yeah.
You know?
There's a reason. This is like genuine, like, this is 20,000 years of human evolution has gotten us to the point where we can really do more things, and what would be reasonable to expect to have happened in that time.
Yeah, within the limits of our species, we've now got to a point where human beings can do mathematical calculations that are better than computers, or who can fight in such a way that, which helps explain, like, without that knowledge, it just looks like 17-year-old Paul Atreides is like really wicked at fighting. But because we're a little bit familiar with the fantasy concept of a teenager who's just really good at fighting.
No, just finds it really easy.
Yeah, I imagine that was the film's get out of jail free card, that they knew people would watch this and go, well, of course he is, because that's how these movies work.
Yeah.
When actually it is a bit more complex than that. What did you think that certain aspects of the universe were really cool? You know how when we talked about Star Wars, we were like, oh, how did you come up with like lightsabers and R2-D2? What in the Dune universe do you think that's awesome? Particularly in film one.
To be fair, okay, well, I mean, the most iconic thing from the Dune universe is the worms. That is the most iconic thing. Like, they are, like, who would have thought, like, a worm in the desert is, like, this cool, epic kind of monster, but also it's not like, they're not evil, they're kind of like, you know, they're a natural force to be reckoned with, and they are done really well in the films, like, really, really cool, in both films, actually. Even in the first one, the scale and the, they're almost like a natural disaster, but they're a creature in themselves. It's very cool.
Yeah, you're right, that concept, I can't think of a comparison apart from later renditions of it. Famously, ACOTAR has the worm versus Feyre fight, and it's basically a similar type of worm. But I like how, like, both of those books used what is effectively the world's most pathetic creature.
Yeah.
For people who know nothing about Dune, and I start explaining, well, it's this planet that has a lot of worms. They look at me like, yes, so? And I'm like, no.
Like, in the sand.
Yeah, and like, ginormous.
Yeah.
So, no, that is an awesome concept. I love all their gadgetry. And I know we're saying this is a less kind of technological universe, but I loved the imagination around, like, the ornithopters.
Yeah.
Love that just as much as I love, like, pod racing and all this sort of thing.
Yeah, they're like mechanical technological inventions, right?
Yeah.
Rather than like computing ones.
Yeah. I love all the various ways in which the various mechanisms that people have to assassinate one another, like the hunter-seeker that goes to get Paul in film one. And I love a lot of this was added to just in the film in terms of the visuals. Everything from the way the spacecraft descend onto Arrakis was done beautifully.
Oh, incredible.
I think that's my favourite sequence actually in the film, which might not be particularly memorable for people, but when House Atreides arrives and step out of their spacecraft and they get given that almost formal, like a military welcome.
Yeah.
And you see all the different people who are greeting them in all their different costumes, and there's like a bagpipe soundtrack going on. I remember thinking, this is awesome. Yeah. I love this.
Yeah, it is cool. Beautiful. And the scale, again, the scale of the ships against the people is just, it's shot really beautifully.
And something they increased from the book that I'm glad, because it was the thing that held my interest, is the power given to women in the Bene Gesserit
I was going to say the Bene Gesserit. I think they are the, like, the thing that makes these movies just way more interesting.
Yeah.
They are like the core of what makes them fascinating. And I think that's because they're this like concept, this sort of religious order, sort of political order that just is not really recognisable. And actually, I think it's one of the things that hasn't then been copied, at least not in the same way, that like I've not seen since, in the many things in Dune have been copied, but I've not seen since like a kind of extremely powerful female political religious order that was like scheming and intelligent, and like it's so interesting that one thing that's extremely core and central to Dune has not been replicated.
Yep, and not with enough prominence. As you were saying that, I was scanning, thinking I'm going to find an example, I'm going to find one. And I can't. You're right. The closest comparison is Melisandre, the Red Woman, who has some sort of powers, is from a religious order, but you never get stuck into it.
No.
In the way here. And of course, that franchise isn't wrapped up properly in book form for us to really even understand what the hell was that all about.
No, exactly. and the Bene Gesserit are super interesting because they are an order in and of themselves. Like, they are secretive and clearly they communicate across the world between themselves, but they also entrench themselves across every other powerful family. And they're like, they're sitting as like wives of the leaders, or as concubines, or as like, the emperor has his truthseer right by his side the whole time. So they've put themselves into incredibly powerful positions everywhere, and yet they're also like very closely connected, and that's in the film really done really well with the visuals of how they look. Like, you can immediately identify one of them, like with their like kind of religious looking outfits and the veils and kind of elaborate costumes and things.
They were some of my favourite costumes, actually.
Yeah, stunning.
The Bene Gesserit. And Jessica's version of it feels very toned down because she's taken on a more almost semi-royal position in the Atreides household. But when she gets back into her cloaks and her sort of, and we'll talk about the second film in a minute, but as we see more of them, I almost think, they're cool, I pick them. I want to hang out with them.
But also, they're definitely evil.
But also definitely,
but like in a cool way.
We should say that you and I have not completed the Dune universe. So there might be concepts and things that we're talking about here where we just don't know.
Yeah, I've not read further than the first book.
Yeah,
so
me too. So these things, we may be saying things where people are like, oh, no. But that is because you have more knowledge than us.
Yeah.
But insofar as these films take us, the Bene Gesserit sit on this knife edge of, are they a force for good? We certainly feel that Jessica is a lead protagonist. And yet, as the films go on, you start to see a real darkness to them.
Well, yeah, but even in the first one, the
Reverend Mother.
The Reverend Mother comes in and, like, starts torturing poor Paul, like, almost immediately. Like, there is definitely a sinister side to their whole ethos.
Yeah.
Like, right from the beginning.
I was like, who is this creepy grandma? What is she doing to Timothée Chalamet's hand?
And she has some noble speech about, like, how it's about, being able to tolerate the pain and be able to think your way out of the situation is what makes us human over being an animal. But, like, still torture.
And in contrast to things like the Jedi Order or a bunch of a similar-ish concept in different fantasy or sci-fi franchises, a lot of those feel very male.
Yeah.
This is a real girl power version.
Yeah.
And they train them in fighting, the use of the voice, all of this stuff. And Jessica is trying to pass that on to Paul, her son, which is really a lead kind of thread in the first film. Yeah. Which did you think was better, 1 or 2, before we segue into
question. 2? Because I feel like I've heard from a lot of people that they think 2 is better.
Ooh.
But I think I like 1 better.
Me too. I loved 2. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I was concerned, as ever with these sort of things, that you think, are they going to get too big for their boots? Is this going to start to get... are they going to lose pace? We've done the world building now. Where's this going to go? Especially if this is going to not move towards a big wrap up and this is going to leave us
into a third one.
If this is going to lead into a third one. Exactly. And film 1 had been so strong. But I think I prefer the first film out of personal preference rather than anything to do with quality, because I love an introductory world build.
Yeah, maybe that was it.
Yeah, and I liked its simplicity. And as the world expanded, that held my interest in film 2. But I felt film 1 had slightly more cohesion, probably because of the fact it is film 1 rather than a slight in-betweener, which it looks like film 2 is going to become.
And that comment I said about the first film having a really simple plot, I don't think that carries into film 2. I think you're right. The film 2 has a little bit more complexity in terms of different things going on and different things you need to follow, and it lost that kind of single thread that was there in the first film.
Yeah, as we start to talk about film 2, it's like, oh, and then it goes here, and then it goes there.
Yeah.
And this thing expands more. And in fact, if anything, there were some concepts that get brought in film 2 where you're like, what? I'm sorry, we're going to have a sort of unborn, prescient child. And I know this comes from books, but there were a couple of concepts where I was like, I'm not sure my brain can cope with all these things.
I think that's starting to hint at one of the things that people talk about the Dune books is that they are quite weird. And you didn't get that as much in the first film. You didn't get the weirdness of the Dune universe in the first film. They steered quite away from it. Like, the Bene Gesserit, a little bit weird, but like in a kind of, like, they managed to contain it to be kind of, to kind of make sense in the universe. Whereas the second one strays a little bit into what people would say is quite odd and bizarre about the Dune books. Like, the like omnipotent baby that in the books is like grows into this kind of like really fast growing child that is like some kind of genius child that can like, do anything and
I was
think
like,
anything.
oh,
and, like,
no.
And like these kinds of, and even like things like the riding of the worm, which is like epic, but like it's kind of weird. Like there's like more bizarre concepts and things that get brought in, and that I haven't read the later books, but I believe the books just get weirder and weirder and weirder, and a lot of people will like tell you not to bother to read the later ones because they get so bizarre. So I think that starts to creep in the second film a little bit.
It did manage, though, to retain an element of humanity, which can be lost when you've got these big, high concept, multi-world sort of things. Like, you do still really care about Paul and Shani, and I liked that it didn't rush his integration into the Fremen.
No.
Which isn't really nice. Like, that could have been something, they could have done that where we start the second film and he's already integrated with them. Whereas it really takes about an hour and a half.
Yeah, and like the different Fremen, some of them taking him on immediately and others being much more skeptical, including Chani, who's very skeptical. And like, I like that. It's like, we're not just going to assume that these people, even though they have been influenced by the Bene Gesserit's kind of meddlings, we're not just going to assume that they will all be naive and immediately follow him. That would be a kind of silly assumption to make.
I think the delicate recipe of any second film in a franchise really hinges on, can you keep us interested in your main characters while still showing growth and an emotional journey for them that is captivating, but also can you introduce new characters and for them to feel fully fleshed out so that by the end of the movie we've almost forgotten that they're new. This was something we praised. I mean, we praised Two Towers to the hilt.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But, we always say that the introduction of Rohan feels like they've been there the whole time by the time you get to the end of Two Towers. And in this, I thought enough screen time was given to sort of Austin Butler and Florence Pugh as new introductions.
Yeah, and I guess the Emperor a little bit as well. But
I definitely.
Of those, I think probably the introduction of Fade Routher of Austin Butler was probably the best new character.
Yes.
I thought he was really interesting, and I think I probably have some reservations about how the Harkonnens are done in the films, in that they are a little bit like too evil. It's like, would you ever really have a race of people who their whole joy in life is just being cruel and killing, and like, you know, they are stereotypically just, here is a whole planet of people who at heart are genuinely evil, which to me is not, I don't think that's meant to be what they are in the books, and I also don't think that's like a realistic kind of world building.
Yeah.
But if you are going to do that, and you're just going to say, right, these guys are just the evil ones, I think they did it well. I thought the character of Feyd-Rautha was kind of fascinating.
And you can tell that a first movie has been critically acclaimed and very well loved when, come the second movie, a whole host of, like, A-list actors pile in. Like, yep, I'll participate in this. Yes, please. Which is a hallmark of so many of the other franchises.
Well, I'd say that the four of them, so Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Florence Pugh, Austin Butler, are almost like your four... They're like a generation of the new kind of hottest actors in the world.
Yeah, definitely.
They are that generation of, the new A-listers.
They're also, like, quality actors.
Yes.
So, you know, this is, like, Oscar nominees.
Of course,
in that four.
Yeah.
Maybe three of the four. Definitely Timothée Chalamet, definitely Austin Butler, and I think possibly Florence Pugh. Not Zendaya yet. But, yeah, these aren't even just, like, hot young things in the sense that they're the current teen talent. It's that these are really hot acting talent.
Yeah, they're like, they're almost like how I imagine like classic Hollywood actors and actresses to be. They're kind of like exceptionally good at what they do, but also all stunningly beautiful.
Yes. But I love that group got together and were happy to be in a sci-fi franchise. It's like, yes, please. But in the second film, even had like a cameo from Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah.
It has Léa Seydoux in it in some of the most brilliant 5 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
Where she's one of the Bene Gesserit. And I love that sequence where she tries to seduce, or she does seduce Feyd-Rautha.
Yeah.
And she sort of comes back afterwards like, I have succeeded with my mission. Surprisingly, he wanted to sleep with me. What kind of mission was this?
But that's what the Bene Gesserit are so good, because they are manipulative in like we're not pretending that they are not female. Like they are female and they're using their femaleness in like good and bad ways.
Yeah.
You know, like they're doing whatever they need to do to get on. We're like, I think it's fascinating.
I loved the cultural integration stuff with Timothée Chalamet in this, or with Paul in the second film, where you see him really commit to learning the traditions of a people, to learning the ways of a people, which is a brilliant way of the old show don't tell to us version. So we get to see more of Fremen culture and expansion of that world. Yeah. One of the things I love the most about these books and the films is the linguistic depth of the world. Like you start to absorb that the sort of sacred worm is Shah-Hulud, and that he becomes Muad'Dib, and that they're waiting for the Lisan al-Gaib, and it's so beautifully close to a version of almost Arabic that sounds beautiful to say and works so well with like a desert setting. It's just so cohesive. I love it.
And I think there has been criticism that I think there's a few shallow criticisms of Dune, that it's like it's kind of penning a kind of white savior narrative over like the kind of this like kind of pseudo-Arabic style of culture. But I think that is mostly coming from people who potentially haven't necessarily seen the film, or maybe they haven't understood what we were talking about, like about the chosen one narrative being kind of flipped and it's being criticised.
Yeah, and it's being hollowed out.
Exactly. And the whole point is that this concept of a white person coming into basically a brown culture, and he does rise to power within that, but it's only because of these kind of manipulations and this like big force. And I don't think any of us believe that this is going to be like a successful ending. Like, he is endlessly seeing visions of horror and despair, and really what the whole story is about is inspecting and criticising the white saviour narrative.
Yes.
Rather than it's not trying to idolize it.
No,
Like,
not at all. And it's not as simple as Paul shows up and rescues these people
Not
who
at
are
all.
flailing around.
No.
The thing the second film does so well is show us something that was mentioned in film 1, which is desert power.
Yes.
But in the best possible way. You really start to see, gosh, this civilization is actually amazing.
Yeah.
They've got all these underground tunnels and cities. They've got their own traditions, and they're ingenious. They have managed to cultivate life on a planet that is effectively entirely barren.
Yeah.
Through all these brilliant ways. And the second film did that really well. I thought the introduction of the princess, Florence Pugh's character, was interesting.
Yeah.
And that she is sort of recording the active history of the plot as it went. That was a good device. You remember she's speaking into her little voice memo recorder.
Yeah, and that is reflective of, in the book, at each of the beginning of every chapter, there's a quote from the princess's kind of history.
Yeah.
That she's written. So she's kind of recorded history of Paul and of his rise and, everything that's happened. And so we're seeing snippets of this historical text that's essentially been written in like the future of she knows everything that has happened, and so we're seeing it as if it's historical, which is they used that in the second film as well, which is nice.
Before I get into the underuse of Florence Pugh, who I think is magnificent, let's talk about the casting across both films, because that is always so fun. And this is the kind of book that before the film was cast, and I wasn't into it early enough, but I imagine people did like fan casting of who was going to be who. And this to me is a cast like at full strength. It's such a powerful ensemble that I almost can't believe how much time it will take us to go through and be like, oh, and
every
so-and-so
single
is
person.
them.
Yeah, I'm about to like start listing, and I'm like, well, I basically list all the characters in the first film, and then all the new characters in the second film.
There isn't really someone where I think that person's not pulling their weight.
No.
Or that person doesn't seem to be really getting their teeth into this.
You know who I think is doing the best, though?
Who?
Jessica.
Oh, Rebecca Ferguson.
Rebecca Ferguson.
Interesting.
I think is the best in all of both films.
Okay. Why so? She is amazing.
I think she just that character has a lot of depth, and that's true of many of the characters, but I think in particular is a very complicated character to understand, because she's got a lot of conflicting different motivations and emotions. She obviously, in the first one, she is clearly devoted and in love with Leto Atreides, but she also has this connection to the Bene Gesserit, that this devotion to that order, and those two things conflict and in her decision making around her own son. And then in the second one, we see her kind of taking and using all of this knowledge that she's gained from the Bene Gesserit, but using it to her own advantage.
Yes.
To put her son into the position that she wants him to be in.
Yes.
And she's very manipulative. And I think at any one moment, you don't know whether she is sincere or whether she is completely manipulating everything. Mm-hmm. And they leave it essentially completely open. My interpretation is that it's all a manipulation. But I don't think they're trying to say either way. And you could read it however you like. And I think Rebecca Ferguson leaves it incredibly on that knife edge of what are her real motivations, and yet you completely believe the character the whole way through.
What a hard role to play, because that role has to keep in balance, and Rebecca Ferguson does it really well.
Yeah.
Both being driven by enormous love for Paul and for Leto. In film one, they barely have much screen time together, her and Oscar Isaacs, but man, do I believe it.
Yeah.
And in the books, you're supposed to understand this is a couple that genuinely love each other.
Yes.
And so a lot of her motivations come from love, but that has to balance with this sense that, as you say, then there's this other set of motivations that are entirely self-interested and possibly go to quite a dark place.
Yeah, and it's about survival, but not just survival of her, survival of this bloodline that is really important, both for her her family, but also for the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah. I think though, seeing some of the cast pop up, and if we go back to right when the first trailer was released and we were like, oh my God, we're going to see this. within 10 seconds, I was like, oh, wait, hang on. This is a film with Timothée Chalamet, Oscar Isaacs, Jason Momoa. When's this out?
Yeah, I know. Oscar Isaacs was incredible. He's hardly in it, but he's just so good.
I'm going to save a lot of my discussion of him for one of our categories.
Okay, that seems sensible.
But I love that, even your subsidiary characters, real big names, wanted to play, either out of love of the book or out of wanting to work with this director, or they were somehow compelled by the project. So people like Stellan Skarsgård are brilliant in this. Charlotte Rampling is in it. There are people who have got almost less than 3 minutes on the screen in the film who themselves would be justified as carrying a movie.
Yeah.
So, and that goes across both films. And then, we get to film 2 and in comes Austin Butler and Florence Pugh. And you're like, how?
I'm assuming Florence Pugh is going to get way more to do in the third one. So
yes.
Don't worry about her.
Me too. Or there was that cameo from Anya Taylor-Joy and I was like, she
She
would not have signed up for this.
She has been set up for the third one.
Yeah, unless there was something a bit bigger.
She's Alia, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, she's briefly like the future version of her.
Of the creepy baby.
But it's such it's like a very quick vision. And I was like, wait, what? Huh? And then it was... And then
I mean, if
over.
anyone's going to play like a kind of creepy baby child grown-up creature, it would be Anya Taylor-Joy. Yeah,
she's perfect. That's what I mean. This feels like a film where the fan cast became the real cast.
I think so, although there are some standout differences because people wouldn't necessarily have thought out of the box. Like, Duncan Idaho does not look like Jason Momoa in the books.
Yeah.
Like, and I think similar for Gurney Halleck, it's not... I never imagined him like that. He, sits around and plays a guitar most of the time in the books.
He likes poetry and things.
Yeah. So, I feel like there are some changes that they made, but they fit within the world that Denis Villeneuve has made rather than the Frank Herbert version of the world. So,
that's right. And they become these very... they've gone for visual memorability as well because you're introduced to this plethora of new names and characters. It is easy to be like, that's Jason Momoa and his character, and
he
that's
looks very different to the other one. Yeah,
it was an easy way of distinguishing between, and his character has to be someone who's like the fighting master, and you're like, I would not mess with that guy.
Yeah,
okay, sold. The dangerous one is Jason Momoa, right? Okay, that's easy casting. Nice. Timothée Chalamet, who is just so busy doing back-to-back movies, and he just must have his pick of scripts. I think was a wonderful person for them to get for Paul, which is such a difficult character to cast because if he doesn't have likability, your movie does not exist.
It's true. The whole point of him is charisma.
Yes. And yet, though, there is that element of this is a sort of Frodo-esque role of other people are going to start eclipsing you in terms of interesting side characters or really jazzy cameos. You have to remain likable, and we've got to sort of sit through just you for a lot of the time.
But he's also got to look like a boy, but not be a boy, which is exactly what Timothée Chalamet does.
He is. That's where his perfection lies in this casting. That he has to fulfill this narrative of going from it's a boy to man narrative. Yeah, even within these two films. Yeah. My favourite moment for him and for the character in film 2 is when he basically starts to say, I am Duke Paul Atreides. And I was like, you go. You put that ring on.
Yeah.
and he is the Lisan al-Gaib. He is the Muad'Dib.
He decides to use all of the advantages he's been given and suddenly says, right, well, I'll do it then.
Yes.
Yeah.
It actually... to me, when he sort of announced all his titles, gave me the chills that I always get from I am Daenerys Targaryen, something of her name, Mother of Dragons, Breaker of Chains, and I thought, yeah, you and I are so
But that is exactly what you're meant to feel, but also what you're not meant to feel, because, we're being taken in by his power.
Yes.
Just as the Fremen are, just as, all his followers are. We're being sucked in by his...
Yeah. You're right. We're signing up to his little cult, aren't we? Because at the end of the second film, I think, oh, great, Paul's going to win. Fantastic.
That is not the vibe. That is not what we want.
You're right. It's so clever. You have to catch yourself because you have to go, it almost looks like Paul's going to be the next emperor.
Yeah.
And then you think, oh no, but wait, that's the problem. Oh, God. So
Yeah.
very, very cleverly done.
Yeah.
Shall we go to our categories?
Let's do it.
Oh, fun. Okay. So we have retained the same categories. That
Yeah, we
had.
didn't need to change them.
No, we love our categories.
No.
They're great. The first of which is the thermometer category, where we assess the hotness levels of whatever it is we are discussing a day, and we tend to give it a sort of percentage. Maddie, what do you think overall, if we put together Dunes Part 1 and 2, what is the hotness level?
You know, it's really interesting. So we don't do this out of like 100 degrees.
Yes, our degrees, that's right.
It's like the vibe is very high, but the actual content
It's very low.
is very low.
So true.
It's like there are a lot of hot people in here, and they're like kind of wandering around in like hot things, doing cool
Hot stuff.
and wearing cool things. But I'm not like being given anything like explicit to jump onto. So yeah, maybe I'll give it like a 60.
That is really well expressed, because I was going for like a 30 or 40, because
Yeah.
I was scanning the content of these films or even the books and thinking, I'm scraping the barrel here. There's barely a kiss.
Maybe it's just the cast is just hot.
I think it's that. No, but it's more than that. It is what you said, which is that you start from a base level of the cast are hot, and we'll get into that.
Yeah.
We'll get into some objectification in a minute.
Yeah.
But that they're in awesome outfits in a cool universe, generally expanding their hotness.
Yeah, and maybe this is a point to kind of contrast this to, there was a previous adaptation of Dune, which was by the director David Lynch, and it is often vilified as being pretty crap, but like, my dad, Dune Obsessive, loves it because it's a very straight adaptation of the book. It's like, let's take the scenes from the book and turn them into a movie. And like, it looks naff, right?
Yeah.
Like, it just looks kind of crap. All the people look like they're just kind of being forced into like some crappy desert clothes, and they all look like, you know, regular people, but trying to pretend to kind of jump around on and like the sandworm or whatever. It looks kind of stupid.
Yeah.
And this is like the opposite.
That's right.
It's like, it looks luscious.
Yes.
The whole thing. The people, the sets, the costumes, it just looks lush.
Yes, the design, the costuming, and the makeup really works with the beautiful people that they've got in their hands.
Like, I kind of believe that even if we look back at this in 50 years' time, when filmmaking will have moved on another level, it will still look beautiful.
I totally agree. And whoever at points did the costuming, sometimes I felt like they just had like a really horny day.
Yeah.
Like, for example, or just like in a set, it depends what you're into, but like the shots on Caladan in the first movie, where we're at the early stages of being introduced to Paul and to Duke Leto Atreides. So you've got Timothée Chalamet and Oscar Isaacs in the same scene.
I know.
And they're having some chat, the contents of which I don't care. They're having some chat that if it was important, I've forgotten it.
They're talking about, like,
Well, being a duke?
Yeah.
Something about being a duke.
duty to your house and
Something.
Yeah.
But they're striding about in leather boots and cloaks.
Yeah.
And they've got tousled hair.
across the hills.
Across the hills. And they look like they're from a sort of Scottish fantasy epic.
Yes.
And I'll just rewatch that scene occasionally, like, look at those two. Oh my God. And that's an example of the content is like not important.
Yeah.
But they look hot.
Yeah.
Do not even get me started on... Okay, actually, we're just going to skip straight to it. Why is Oscar Isaacs naked
Yeah. When he's dying.
when he's dying?
I think it's meant to show vulnerability, but I'm not sure that's what they ended up doing.
No, not at all. I was thinking, who was in charge of this decision? A, thank you. But B, I mean, it's shameless. You know,
Yeah.
come on. And I've completely forgotten that that scene is very important. You know, it's effectively his death scene.
Yeah.
But I'm not looking at that.
No.
I'm not listening to what Baron Harkonnen is saying. No. I'm looking at Oscar Isaac's arm.
Yeah, I know.
And the shot where he's sort of sat at the table,
Yeah.
there was a visible or like an audible intake of breath.
Yeah.
In this, I remember because we were watching it together, and I think both you and I in the IMAX and like a bunch of people around us just went, huh? Wait, what? Sorry, what's going on here? But fantastic casting, because if you're going to cast somebody who looks like Timothée Chalamet. And then you've got to cast his dad.
Yeah.
You got to cast someone hot.
You gotta cast a hot dad.
You really do. And I'm glad of it, because otherwise, like, I have to have reached a point where I can't really let myself like Timothée Chalamet. I have to start to accept that he's in a different age bracket from me.
You know, I'm exactly the same. I'm like, I can look at you and know that you're beautiful.
Yeah.
But you're too young for me.
That's right. I think this is something where, like, younger us would have adored Timothée Chalamet. And he's still I still find him like, oh, Timothée Chalamet's in a movie.
He's objectively lovely to look at, but he is not the object of desire that he would have been if we were 10 years younger.
Totally agree.
He's too young. We're like old now.
I know, which is why when I saw that Jason Isaacs was in this movie...
Oscar Isaacs,
sorry. Jason Isaacs is a lot
more different.
Very different. I was like, oh, thank God, because he's legitimately fanciable for me.
Although older. You know, he's more old than Timothée Chalamet is young, but...
Do you think Oscar Isaacs is older than us?
Yeah.
Is
like
he?
A decade at least.
Oh my God, he looks so good. Really? Is he?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's legit. That's fine.
Yeah,
Him, Jason Momoa, I'm like, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So there was enough, I feel like my thermometer category can be legitimised of like, there's a lot of hot people in this movie.
Yeah.
But it's true. And in the second one, and this goes across the whole cast, like you've got, even when Lea Seydoux is in it, she's in like beautiful low-backed dresses.
Oh, and Zendaya is just
my
like
God.
a stunning human being. Like, how does she exist?
You
I don't
can't
know.
mess her up.
No.
Like, in any way. They tried to make her look like a little bit like sort of kind of down and out in the desert.
No, she still looks like a model.
Yeah, she's a model.
Yeah.
You're like, what is this person doing here? What did you think about their relationship, Paul and Shani, or the chemistry between Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya?
Yeah, I thought it was quite interestingly done, because it wasn't overdone and it wasn't like overemphasized. Like, it was important, and I actually really quite liked all of the stuff kind of in the desert where they like, I think they end up in a tent.
That's film
like,
2,
Yeah, they're like slowly kind of like coming together, and I think it's quite organic the way that like she is skeptical of him as the Lisan al-Gaib, but she connects to him on like a human level, like as a person, and she's the only person there who's really looking at him as a person. Like the rest of the Fremen are either looking at him as the Lisan al-Gaib or like assessing him skeptically as to whether he is this messiah, or like even his mother is now kind of using him as this puppet in her plans. Yeah. So there's nobody in that whole Fremen sequence that is just seeing him as a person apart from Chani. And so I think that's why it feels quite natural and I quite like it. But it's not like overly explicit or, you know.
Their relationship is really different in the two films, because in the first film, Shani is barely in it, apart from in his sort of prescient visions.
Yeah, she's just this vision of what he's going to find in the desert.
And that's difficult, because you want some chemistry in your movie, but it has to only really be achieved through these sort of memory dream sequences where they have some longing glances at each other. But it means that like their kiss scene, which is in another dream sequence, you, as a viewer, you're like, wait, but I haven't bought into why these two people are into each other by this moment. So you're skipping ahead to showing me significant relationship moments when, have they even spoken? Have they even met? And that's quite risky.
Yeah.
But in the second film, you actually get the development of them spending time together and why their relationship is interesting and powerful. And it works well together. The tent minor sex scene, I was sort of like, not sure this is entirely necessary for the movie, but
yeah,
hey ho.
Yeah.
Like, fine. Neither here nor there enough to register on our thermometer scale.
No.
I sort of thought. And then the complexity of when you bring in Florence Pugh in film 2 is, and this is my fault for having watched too many back catalogue films of both Timothée Chalamet and Florence Pugh, is that I love Timothée Chalamet acting opposite Florence Pugh.
Right, yeah.
So I have like an inherent bias to want to watch more of them together, because they are so great in Little Women, and they have such chemistry together that there was even something that registered on screen that the two of them look like they know each other. And I thought, this is because they know each other. I don't know whether Timothy knows Zendaya from before, but I thought, gosh, we're really recasting actors who have acted together romantically with chemistry, and now we're going to set up this really interesting little triangle.
Well, I'm really interested to see whether they go down the love triangle route, and I assume they will, because that is what works in film when you've got these three beautiful people. Like, you wouldn't not. But it's kind of an interesting setup, and I think it's one of the things that, we kind of haven't really distinguished, that the books are way more political than, and kind of slow and character kind of political than the movies. And that's right, because a movie doesn't want to be like stuck in board meetings all the time. That would be really boring. But in the books, I don't believe that there is really, it's not really like a love triangle. It's more of a, the relationship between Paul and the princess is a political alliance that is practical, and that's what you do when you're a leader of a house and you're trying to set up a political alliance, and that's fine. And he also has had a relationship with Chani, and that's all fine. Like, I don't think it's really like...
It's not emotions led in the book.
No. Yeah. Whereas I think it will be in the film.
I agree.
I think it needs to be, because that's what works on film.
Yeah, that's right. You don't have that energy on screen if you're not bringing that. And they managed to introduce that in a matter of split seconds on the screen, which is that that Paul is making a political alliance by marrying the princess. And yet they manage really wonderfully to capture a flicker of, they almost look at each other and think, he thinks like, she's hot. Yeah. And vice versa. Yeah. And I thought, wow, that's so brilliantly done.
And that it's going to affect what's going on with Chani immediately. So
she sees Florence Pugh and thinks, oh, damn. Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. And vice versa. Yeah. Florence Pugh sees her as well. So I thought that was really, really neatly done. And you're right, I think it will lean in that direction as they go on.
Cool.
Okay, so... let's go to battliness.
Oh!
God, I love this category. And there's stuff here for this.
Epicness. No, I mean, this... it's like 100% full of like, epic set-piece scenes, and like, the scale we've talked about in terms of the visuals is equally backed up with the scale of like, various fight scenes. And I'd say particularly that's what I liked in the first film.
Yeah.
Was like... the epic battle that's like the second half of the movie is just really cool.
Yeah.
And it is awesome. And I think it's made more awesome by the fact that it's quite physical. This whole concept of like, that they're fighting with like blunt force objects, and we haven't even talked about the concept of the shields.
Yes,
and
exactly.
like how they like are fighting with these... they're fighting so that they can like get through the shields and stuff, and like it adds a kind of different dimension to how they learn to train and fight and stuff. And so I think they did that extreme well. And I would say, in the way that I've just said that the Dune books are a political book first and foremost, the first movie feels like essentially like an action sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
And it does it really well.
Although, having said that, I could have used more in the films about the detail within fight training, about how to get through the shields, the fact that the shields... They do, but I could have taken more, because I love that kind of thing. And I think the battliness in these films is awesome, very high level, but I'm going to try and justify giving it an 80% rather than like, totally full out 100.
Yeah.
By way of comparison, which is that the two large-scale fights that do happen, so the battle where House Atreides is defeated at the end of the first film, and then that sort of massive showdown where the Emperor arrives at the end of the second one, are both great, and there are some cool moments. But when we were praising things like the Battle of Helm's Deep, and when we finally get to things like the Battle of Winterfell, which we haven't talked about on a podcast yet, you and I are so praising of the fact that the complexity of those battles is such that there's so much richness, but you also totally understand who is where, what little subset of geography within the structure is what.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think we quite get that level of detail in these films.
No.
It's sort of like the army show up and things start to explode.
You're right. And I think the reason that the thing that I found missing in terms of setting that up for me in the first one was that I found what they missed in setting up the world of Arrakis was that we never really saw many of the like regular people that were living in Arrakis, but not the Fremen in the desert. Like we see House Atreides arrive, and we're like, to this huge city, but who are they arriving to? Was it that the Harkonnens were everyone and they're all completely gone and it's now only House Atreides there? Or were there like, I think there are meant to be like Arrakis people. Like,
yeah, where are those guys?
Who are like living on the planet, who are not Fremen, and they're not House Atreides. They're like the people of Arrakis. And we never see them, and we never see how they fit into that battle. So you never get a scale of what's the stakes of that city and that battle, apart from the armies themselves.
Yes.
You don't
or
get the normal people.
That's right. Or a couple of characters. That in that first film, End Battle, I am worried for Jessica and Paul. I'm very worried for Duke Leto. I'm also distracted by his nakedness, but whatever. And other than that, you're right, it's just a bunch of people fighting a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And the complexity of that. And as you say, the stakes don't extend beyond, oh no, I liked this family.
Yeah.
Please don't blow them up.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't have the richness of some other fantasy battles or sci-fi battles to that extent.
But in terms of like epicness of like the rest of the world, like, you know, there are parts of it that I really enjoy. They're not necessarily like just the battles, but like, you know, the spice machines and you'd already talked about like the spaceships coming down and those kind of like those kind of epic epic things are done really well at scale, and the worm as well, like these kind of visual epic pieces are done really well.
Yeah, like if this category is often alternately called kind of badassness. It's so badass.
Yeah.
For that, actually, maybe if we look at it that way, it's very high. The sort of awesomeness of it is top level for sure, because other elements of combat are not just army fights army, but are things like Jessica using the voice.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a weapon.
That's cool.
That's very cool. And the minor weaponry of, we've already said, like the Hunter-Seeker. I love the close combat work that the sequences where Paul is fight training with Gurney.
Yes, yeah.
If you haven't listened to other episodes of this podcast, you'll have missed me always talking about how much I enjoy a fight training sequence.
Yeah.
But I love it, and I'm glad that could have been skipped.
Yeah.
There are so many things this film takes its time to include, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
And that even in a film with massive battle sequences, both 1 and 2, some of the best sequences are the close hand-to-hand combat sequences. There's one for Paul at the end of the first film. He fights that guy from the Fremen who he kills.
Yeah.
And one of the best bits of the second film is Austin Butler in the arena.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely annihilating.
Yeah.
Like anyone who comes... I thought I was watching Gladiator for a minute.
Yeah,
I was like, what is this?
My only kind of criticism in this category is in some moments I found... And maybe this is just my taste rather than like an actual criticism of the movies. In some moments, I found the movies slightly sadistic and cruel. Like there were moments of like the Harkonnens that I felt like just went a bit further than they needed to. And there were like visuals around like, I think in the first one, they're like draining loads of people's blood upside down that they've been like, and it's like, I felt like, and maybe... the Gladiator thing, I think, in general was pretty good, but, like, I think overall I found it maybe went a bit far for me in, like, cruelty when it didn't necessarily need to. It's like, we can see the flaws of humans without, like, going into, like, kind of sadism a bit, which I don't necessarily like, but...
Yeah, the Fëanor Wraitha stuff, I think, was meant to show us exactly that, right? Because you've introduced your big bad Baron Harkonnen in movie 1.
Yeah.
And it's like, how are you going to introduce someone even worse?
Yeah.
So, who is a sadist? And I think they even call him that in the film. When the Bene Gesserit are thinking about breeding with him.
And, like, some of the, like, negatives, they're like, this is an unstable kind of person. Yeah. So we might not be able to use him.
I think they're even considering, like, who to advise sort of Florence Pugh's character to marry. And they're thinking about Austin Butler, and they're like, well... He is a sadist.
Yes.
He's insane.
There's like one negative here.
Oh well, there we go. And it was brilliant that Austin Butler agreed to be in this film where he's so hot. He's such a beautiful actor, and he's basically unrecognizable.
Yeah,
which
completely.
is great in this.
You know, the other cool thing they do with that whole sequence is the black and whiteness
Loved
of that
it.
whole planet.
The grayscale.
Yeah, it's like the light in that planet just doesn't, it's just a different colour.
Yep.
And so everything is in this, like, it's not even just black and white, it's like, it's just lit in this kind of cool, and it is black and white, but it's in black and white in a kind of, a very bright light kind of way that's kind of disconcerting.
Everything
It's
about
really good.
the visuals, and we've not even got on to like Hans Zimmer's soundtrack, but everything. Like, I don't think we've been as praising of every department on a film doing their job to the highest level since we've talked about Lord of the
I
Rings.
was going to say, apart from Lord of the Rings.
Apart from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But this did that, which meant that in an age where there is an endless churn of like Marvel movies or big budget kind of trash,
Yeah.
this feels at so many points in both films like genuinely artistic.
Of course.
Like
yeah.
so artistic,
Yeah.
in a way that's really satisfying. And I love the conflation of those two things, that we can bring, there's nerdism and like high sci-fi and high fantasy.
Yeah.
But there are also bits where I'm sure somebody who is a much greater cinephile than me would say, oh, that's a nod to Tarantino in that bit. Or something. And I'm like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
There's real quality filmmaking
Absolutely.
going on.
And that is badass.
That is badass. Exactly. Which leads us to kind of wrap up with obsession fuel. Now here, I'm giving it a full out.
There
It's
is
full.
as much as you could possibly want. You could read 100 books in this series. Like, you could dig into the history and the myth, everything in this whole world as much as you wanted to. So,
language,
Yeah.
prophecy, the layers of different terminology, this is exactly the kind of book and franchise where you need a sort of map, and you also need to know who's who in what bloodline, and I love that sort of detail. It's my favourite for this
And the
kind of thing.
history as well, because it is meant to be a real kind of imagining of what the future could be like. You've essentially got 20,000 years of history to try and understand how we got there.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also, just from a film perspective, something that really benefits from, like, let's say you're crazy and you've listened to this whole podcast and you've not seen these films, which would be, I'm pretty sure, like, no one.
An odd choice.
But you would really benefit from, like, a chat with someone first who can give you a brief outline. Because, like my mum, there was a bunch of people, my mum and my sister included, who had seen the first one, or a couple who had seen the first one and were like, huh? What? And therefore didn't like it.
Right.
And I thought, like, how can you not like, how? This is a masterwork.
Genius, yeah.
And then my mum had me write out a sort of, like, a crib sheet of, okay, this person, I think I sent you a picture of it, here's my diagram.
Like a little family tree, but of
Exactly.
connections between
like,
characters.
okay, the Harkonnens are on Gaiety Prime, and I think I did a little drawing, and these people are against these people, and with that knowledge, she then rewatched the first one and watched the second one and had like a transformed experience.
Yeah.
And this was the same when that was the reaction after she was totally lost after like Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
And then we did like revision before Two Towers. She's like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So it is of that complexity that rewards that engagement.
But it's an interesting question whether like a film should need that, or whether you should be able to go into it blind and pick up on those things. And I actually think that they did do a good job of kind of doing enough to hint at the world building, but without, we were talking about earlier about show not tell. That's not just in the story, but it's in the world building. And I think one of the great examples is the whole concept of mentats, who are these like human computers, is just hinted at. It's not explained. They don't go, this is a person who can do really complex calculations in their mind and they've been evolved to be like this. They just hint at it by having, there's a calculation that needs to be done. The guy's like eyes flip up into his head and he gets the answer out really quickly. And you if you're concentrating,
you're following
realise
that.
You're like, this guy is able to do really complex calculations. That's some really interesting,
Yeah.
like, little, and you are able to then dig into that. And if you want to then go away and like read about, you know, how that evolved in the Dune universe across thousands of years of evolution, blah, 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 and the spice being a part of that, you can do that. But you don't need it for your enjoyment of the film. You just get enough in the film to kind of satisfy you.
I think the film has enough, or the films have enough momentum now to justify a third one.
Absolutely.
It certainly felt like it was being set up that way. I now want a third one.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, gimme. But also, the pressure on it will be just as high because we've now had 2 quality, strong ones.
Yeah.
That a third one will need to adhere to the books enough that you don't get outraged from the fan base, but also maintain an interest for people who aren't coming to it from a book perspective and are just enjoying it as a cinema experience. So the third one's going to be really interesting. I hope this also has the impact or the effect of really encouraging people to make tourist trips to Jordan.
Yeah.
Yes, because I was enjoying this film especially because so much of it is shot in Wadi Rum. And I've been on holiday to Jordan a lot and it's fantastic. Some of the film is shot in Saudi, but considering this is a desert-based film, they, in the same way that Lord of the Rings is New Zealand, Dune basically is the Jordanian desert. In quite a powerful way. And the tourist experience of going there is fabulous, and I'd recommend it to anyone. But it was also relatively funny because one of the times on holiday there with my friend who is Jordanian, the film was being shot.
Yeah.
And they were trying to keep it under wraps about what it was, especially because, as we have said, think about who's there.
Yeah.
The cast
It's
is
insane,
like,
yeah.
it's like the A-list.
They would be swamped.
So we knew there was that people referred to it as the film because it was just such a massissive deal. Like these films being shot there have been a massive deal in Jordan. And we were down in Aqaba, which is a kind of beach town south of Wadi Rum, where actually a lot of them, turns out, were staying. But not just them, like also the scale of the crew and cinematographers and everything had really kind of flooded this area. So everyone was talking about, you know, the film is being made. And my friend and I were like, what film? Like what is this? What are they shooting? And it turned out that a really brilliant way to get into hotels to use their pools, which you're otherwise not allowed to do, was to show up at the lobby and just say, we're with the film. So my friend and I had some fantastic days at like the Movenpick Aqaba, where we would show up, didn't ask for a pass, and we were like, we're with the film. And they were just like, go ahead.
Was this for part 1 or part 2?
Part 1.
Really?
I think by the time they were shooting part 2, it had
too much.
It had become quite obvious what this was. But it was because the phrase being used was just like the film.
Yeah.
It was assumed that if you kind of knew what that was, the security was just a little bit lax. But so I have to thank Dune separately. But no, I would encourage anyone who likes this movie and is interested in sort of the setting and the scenery to definitely go and visit, because that's awesome. But yeah, the obsession fuel in this, what you can get out of this is, as we said, worthy of being studied as a kind of fantasy or sci-fi A-level text, I think, and long may it continue.
And we will all look forward to part 3.
Oh, it's going to have a release date of like 2029, isn't it? You know, be one of those things where I start to look forward to it.
And then
they release the
you
release
need
date.
to wait another several years.
Yeah, this is like when they announced they were making Wicked, and which is now about 5 years ago. And it was like,
more.
Coming 2024.
Yeah.
And this was back in like 2017. And you and I thought, what? we can't be expected to wait that long. Are you kidding? So I'm fully expecting a Dune 3 release date of sometime in the unperceivable far future. But there we go.
Well, we'll see.
See you next time, Ellie, for a continuation of way more awesome obsessions from us in season 2. You've been listening to the Fangirl Diaries. Follow us on Instagram at Fangirl Diaries Pod.
And do share us with any of your friends that you think might enjoy the podcast, and rate or review us on Spotify or Apple Music.